equipment. See, this is why Looney Tunes really helped me as a kid.
Yeah.
Porky Pig told me I didn't have to deal with not being able to find the words. I just find different words. So this important piece of gear just quit working, which delivers my audio into our switcher system and broadcasts this silky voice out to all of you. Well, that broke. We tried some stuff to fix it.
Just to be clear, we don't know for sure that what we're saying right now is being live streamed, has been live strummed.
It's live strumming. Yeah, I think strumming is I just got a thumbs up from Jordan. And so
we don't know for sure that we're going out to the internet, but we don't know that we're not either. So we might be recorded right now. We might not. So we're just in that great
we're hoping
limbo.
We're live. Look at that. There we are. Boost.
Okay.
No, how do I show? No, that's 200. I don't see this episode yet. Hold on. I keep working on it over here. I suppose I don't really need to see that I'm live. Jordan could just tell me I'm live. But come on. Doesn't everybody want to be part of this fun? If you just chat in right now that I can see you live, that will be helpful. Oh,
we'll
look, Jordan is holding up his phone, showing me looking down at my phone. And to our audience, let me just apologize for this enormous size head, and especially the forehead that only gets bigger by the day. Cory, do you want to tell them what the topic of today's episode number 202 is?
I would love to. So today we're talking about the white coat window. And we named that after the unique period of time that physicians can find themselves in, transitioning from their residency or fellowship programs into their attending positions, and namely the rapid jump in income that happens in that window of time. Like for a lot of us, it's a little bit like boiling a frog. We do a little better, a little more money, a little bit more, and our lifestyle slowly adjusts as our income goes up. Physicians have this unique opportunity where they can do a lot of decision making all at once and almost set themselves up on autopilot to have it work amazingly for the rest of their lives. And they can also make some decisions that make it almost automatic that they don't reach financial independence over the rest of their lives in this unique window of time.
Well, and the thing that you talked about with physicians. So for all of you listening who are entrepreneurs and executives, this is not a time to tune out. We're using a metaphor that occurs with physicians to explain a phenomenon that happens nearly universally in other executives and entrepreneurs. And that is there's a period of time when your income climbs significantly. Now, the beautiful thing about watching a physician's career is we can absolutely predict when that's going to happen. We can see it's like, oh, you finish your school, okay, residency, and you don't make that much money, and then you get your job, and boom. And like as Cory's working with these physicians that are clients of our firm, it's like literally they know the date they're getting their first paycheck that is 5 times the amount of money they've ever made before in their life. Here's the problem for all of us as entrepreneurs or business executives is you don't know when that pop is going to happen. Along with not knowing when the pop is going to happen, you also don't know how long it's going to last. Doctors are enormously employable. You're not getting fired as a doctor unless you, I don't know. What do you need to do, Cory? Like punch the CEO of the hospital in the face, and then you're going to get suspended at least.
Or a patient. Yeah. One of those, one of those two. Yeah.
Probably patient punching frowned on.
Now it is also, we're recording this in the middle of a global pandemic, which has ironically caused some employment and income issues for some physicians. And we never would have thought to say that doctors might find themselves in an income uncertain position in the midst of a global health crisis. But the economics of hospitals and anybody who's not directly combating COVID may see their surgeries put on pause, some of their other patients not coming into the hospital. So doctors are getting a taste of what a business owner might have experienced.
Now the thing about not that long ago
about business owners that, unlike the doctor who usually they know their income's going up and then they start doing all this spending because of it. Business owners can say, oh, I'm about to make more money, so I'm going to spend this money now, and it'll come soon after. And sometimes that can be a lot longer than they thought. I know I saw that at the beginning of my career, getting my business up and running. And even some corporations that have staffs, like big populations of salespeople, actually encourage that kind of spending because
oh my gosh,
it creates a minimum amount of sales that they're going to have to make to go afford that car payment every month.
I had, this is young in my career. I was in my 20s back east at the time, and we were in a, kind of a workshop type setting, and it was with the owner of one of the largest firms in the country. And they literally said, like, oh man, as soon as we get a new young fill in the blank at our firm, one of the first things we want to do is get them to buy that Mercedes. And in part because they wanted to create the pinch on these salespeople that then would put them in the position to go out and work harder, because they didn't want the embarrassment, of course, of potentially having a car repossessed or something like that. But meanwhile, like, literally, these are people in the financial services business being told to make a poor financial decision on their balance sheet because it's a good financial decision on the person that owns the firm's balance sheet.
So this is not just for doctors, but I'm about to tell you why you need to send this to any doctor you might know right now, because we're in white coat window season. Every resident physician in this country, or every fellow that's in their last year of fellowship, there's a few exceptions like everything, but the cycle ends at the end of June. So folks are wrapping up their fellowships or residency programs, and then going out into the job market, signing contracts, July, August, September, going off and into the white coat window and all this new income. So it's really, really timely, and why we're renewing this episode. So please, any doctor you know, even if they're not in residency, because any doctor you know will know someone in residency or fellowship, please get this out there to them. And there's lots of material in here that's going to go well for anybody, because we could all have our own version of a white coat window almost any time, like Paul said.
Yep. And the key is, how do you make sure you can most take advantage of the white coat window? Now, it's actually pretty counterintuitive. How do you take the best advantage of a big spike in income? And what it requires is paying attention to cash flow. That's it. Paying attention to cash flow. Now, here's what I mean by that. Let's say somebody's in a household, they're making $150,000, $200,000 a year. They got to kind of watch big purchases, but they don't need to, budget down to the nth degree on everything that they buy. And then something occurs. Maybe one of the spouses, finishes residency and fellowship and ends up with a big pay raise. Somebody has a breakthrough in the business that they own. They bought a business and now their income's higher than it's ever been before. You can picture the situation. Well, if somebody has already done what you've heard us talk about, of cultivating contentment and understanding, I've got a good, satisfying life, taking in the amount of money I'm taking in now, paying my bills the way that I pay them, and being able to set aside some money. You see, if you're intentionally designing your life the way it is now, you might even have one or two things that you would want additionally that would significantly improve your life. The problem is most people haven't thought it through that much. You see, they're going through, and what they're spending on and the lifestyle they're living is just encased, entrapped, or managed by the total amount of cash flow that they have, not their own intentional choices. It's just like, oh, I can't afford that because I'm out of money, or because the monthly payment of that thing would make me not hit my budget in future months, and I would start going backwards, so I can't afford that. Now, we've talked about this before, but the idea of afford in the way it impacts you is terrible.
That's how they want you to think.
Exactly. And they is everybody trying to make you an offer. So every advertisement, every magazine ad, all of it, radio, they are all push. Elon Musk as a guest on the Joe Rogan podcast, that dude is a marketer. You just hear him like talk casually about the car, all that. I don't even want a Tesla. I kind of wanted a Tesla while I was listening, though. Like, you just get in this distortion field. And all of that creates an environment where when your income expands, if the only thing that's controlled our spending was the amount of income that we have, then when you expand it, you just get more of it. Yeah, Cory, I'm going to step off into some physical sciences for a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So, for those of you listening, you may know that a solid takes on neither the shape nor the size of its container. A liquid takes on the shape, but not the size of its container.
Hence, a
And
glass can be half empty or half full.
yes. And a gas will take on both the shape and the size of its container. So one of the things you have to do if we relate it to a physical science is you need to turn your spending into a solid by being able to track it, by being able to know how much is being spent, where the money's going. It doesn't mean that uncertain things won't happen or there might not be some overspending periodically, but you have a container that is the edges of the spending themselves, not the income that is this variable structure that can get larger or smaller over time. But if you let your spending just get limited because the amount of income that you have, you've turned your spending into a gas and it will expand to any size container being the amount of income that you make. Okay. Sorry about that, Cory.
No problem. This is good. So here is an issue that everyone's going to run into when you're trying to make this play out in your life. Let's use buying a house as an example, because this is, a doctor has been in med school, been in residency, living in probably a relatively crappy apartment compared to now what they can afford with the income that they have. Here's the tricky part is that so many other people are not doing what you're doing. So many people who make relatively less than you are spending way more a percentage of their income to buy the houses that they want to have. So you may find it challenging to find a house that you feel like you deserve early on, because you're like, oh, I could buy this house, I can afford it, but you're gonna have to spend way more of your income because everyone else is throwing so much of their money at buying houses that the prices are going up and up and up, especially right now with interest rates being as low as they are and money's a lot easier to get. So just think about the fact that you don't have to have that much nicer of a house than what you already were in. You could double your lifestyle in house niceness and still not have to spend as much as you could to get the even nicer mansion. Like, wait 5 years and then think about trading up to another house. Just make those small increments, because once you get that spending out there, it's hard to rein it back. Back in.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Thomas Stanley talked about that in his book, The Millionaire Next Door. And that one of the biggest things that really wealthy families do for their children is buy them a nice house that's paid off in a nice neighborhood, because all of the people around you also increase your consumption. So now they place their children in a neighborhood where they go to Cancun on their vacations and they have a certain kind of car and they go out to certain restaurants and literally the wealthy people set up their own children in an attempt to help them set them up to never be able to accumulate their own wealth. Now, the same thing can happen for all of us. That, again, if you have that white coat window as an entrepreneur, and you're kind of noticing a theme here, Cory's talking a lot more to the physicians, Paul's talking a lot more to the entrepreneurs. But one of the things that happens is you go through a period of struggle, whether you're an entrepreneur, professional, growing your income, there's always the window of struggle. And during this window of struggle, sometimes is the time you've got to rally the most possible people around you to continue to support you, because we all fear the thousands of year-old biological underpinning, even recorded in the Bible, of we fear being thrown out in the darkness with the gnashing of the teeth because we don't want to be thrown out of our tribe. And so doing things that the tribe is not doing doesn't seem like it's the sort of thing that's good for us in the long run, literally upsets our biology. So if you're in that spot where you're saying to yourself, hey, I'm kind of looking to expand my lifestyle here, or I'm going through this difficult time, those years of challenge, for an entrepreneur, you might have 3 or 4 really hard years of startup and then things sort of level off. For a physician, it's 10 or 12 years of basically making less than everybody else. Fair enough, Cory?
Fair enough.
Like anybody who got a job in middle management at a retail environment is making far more money than you, because not only they're making more money, but they're not sending 50 grand a year to their education. So on the
That's
net,
right.
they're making a lot more. So when you come out of the back end of that and you're making more money, you have not made more money than the guy climbing the ladder at is Best Buy. Is Best Buy still a thing? They're not. They're
They
not
are
one that's.
still a thing.
They are.
Yeah, they're still
Just
a thing.
checking.
Yeah.
So, so as an example, that
Mhm.
guy working the ladder at Best Buy is now 10 years into that career with a regular bachelor's, and the physician comes out making way more money than him, but not way more money all the way back to the beginning. And by some of the math that we've done, it can take as much as another decade before the physician catches up to the lifetime earnings of, say, a compatriot that would have just gotten an MBA. So even though you feel financially ahead that day when that check comes in, the realization of your average income is still
Right.
pretty low for the last 10 years. And one of the things that you've got to do is catch up, because you're also 10 years behind in accumulating assets.
So just a little grounded humility is all we're we're trying to give. And you know that if you've listened for very long to our podcast, I like to say a phrase: comparison is the thief of all joy. Like, we're comparing you to someone back 10 years from now, and that if that's sucking a little life out of you right now, well, yeah, that should, but so is the comparing on the other side to, like, oh, I need to spend as much as that person and have the lifestyle that looks the same as that person.
Or
So,
what's worse, during the challenges, you just tell your spouse or tell
oh
yourself,
yeah,
the whole reason I'm doing this, we're going to get such a nice house when we're done with this, honey. I will get you a new car. I'm so sorry you're having to deal with this in my long hours. Yeah, well, like, I know you're hanging with me through all this med school stuff, all that. We'll buy you that Porsche Boxster, whatever it is. I don't even know if they sell that anymore, but you get my point. I'm like way behind on my Rob Report subscription, guys.
right.
And if you guys know how I live, you would know how funny that is. But that, and by the way, the one thing I will share is, not only do you have to be careful about what you say it could cost you millions, which we talked about all the way back in episode 32, but you also have to be careful about making sure that you're aware that the increase is there so that you can set aside that surplus. We don't want to be using the word afford. We don't want to, Cory, you brought this up when we were talking before about solving it with spending. That what people will do is find themselves in a spot where they start solving problems with spending rather than maybe doing something different. Can you say a bit about that before we talk about the 5-year wait?
I think my favorite example is that some of the most heavily funded film projects in our nation's history have turned out to be some of the worst movies ever. One of the best examples is a movie called Heaven's Gate with Chris Christopherson, which many of you have never, ever heard of, even if you're 40, 50, 60 years old. And the reason is it kind of turned out crappy. And they spent record-setting amounts of money on that movie. In the artistic world, restrictions pushed creativity. Like, having certain restrictions and putting a box around a problem and saying, okay, I have to solve it inside of this realm, actually produces so much more of a wonderful outcome. And
I couldn't help it. I had to Google. It was like, granted, it brought in $3.5 million at the box office, but cost over $44 million to make.
And that was what, 1974?
Yeah,
Something
it was
like
an
that?
old movie. Yeah.
Yeah. So that now
1980s when it was released.
1980 was when it was released. So made in the late 70s. So here's a narrative that you could have for your spouse instead. Like, honey, baby, sweetie, when we're through this, our income is going to give us so much more freedom of how we spend our time so much more rapidly than anybody else. What I mean by that is, folks think they want a lot of nice toys to have to use in their off time, but what they really want is just more free time. Like,
that's right.
The things that we can do with our money to buy us happiness are so much more around freedom of experience and freedom of how we spend our time. And so many physicians and business owners,
academically proven that people prefer to have their freedom, time, and autonomy over stuff.
And so we create these webs around us of obligation to Tesla finance, to a mortgage, to a, like, people think they want the really, really nice house that comes with a really big mortgage, but oftentimes they find themselves after the fact just feeling like they're trapped inside this house that they've bought for themselves because of those obligations. And I tell clients a lot, the DuckTales cartoon with Uncle Scrooge jumping into his gold coins and swimming around.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real feeling. Now, we don't generally have piles of gold coins in our backyard, but that nice warm feeling of cash all around us is a bear hug that a lot of people never get to feel. And I'll just tell you, once you feel that, you never want to not have that again. And that becomes way more valuable than the next toy, the next house, the next car.
Yeah, and I think that there is another sort of warm blanket, and it feels good for a little while. It's like those Mylar blankets that maybe somebody gives you off after an endurance run or whatever.
Right.
That's
Crinkly
the warm.
ones.
They're crinkly ones. That's when we're wrapped with debt. Is it can feel warm for a little while, but eventually it's all going to fall apart, just like those blankets do. So we're going to talk a little bit about off of, let's say somebody's making $400,000 and there's one of two ways that they're going to go forward.
Yeah.
One is, hey man, I've been working my tail off and I really deserve some reward. So I'm going to be saving, but I'm just going to hold off for 5 years till I really start accumulating capital. And then the other person says, nah, I'm just going to take a good solid run at it. I'm going to go 5 years and really start at year 6. I'm going to just start investing some of the cash I saved and start saving the same amount of money every year. And then what I'm thinking, Cory, is we can hit that, maybe talk a little bit about reopening the window. And then I'll talk about that specialist doctor
story
that had this
happen. Yeah. So the person who says, okay, we're just going to take advantage of our window, start putting money away right away, and has a $400,000 salary and puts 20% of it away every year, 80,000 at just a modest 6% growth rate. After 25 years, they have $4.6 million. Now, the person who says, we'll get there, like, let's have some fun first, work our way up. We just said, okay, what if they don't start saving that 80,000 a year until year 20? Now, they didn't do nothing. So they also start with 80,000 in investments. Like, they put a little bit away here and there somewhere.
Casually,
so now,
as it interested them, they sent some money into something.
So 20 years from there, meaning the same endpoint as the first person, so maybe they're 65 now. They only have $3.3 million. 1.3 million less for that 5-year gap.
And that's the thing everybody forgets about, is that exponential curve. You see, everybody has their first 5 years. Just think of that curve. Like, people even look at the first 5 years and go, oh, it's no big deal if I wait. There's not much growth in the first 5 years.
Tickets are free to the first 5 years. And you can start a new curve whenever you want.
Tickets are free to the first 5 years because, frankly, the show isn't very good the first 5 years.
Yeah.
That's why they're free. The tickets are not free to the last 5 years. And those had to be purchased 25 years ago. So I'm going to give you guys one more story of something that happened to a client many, many years ago. It's before the mortgage crisis. And this person happened to be a specialty physician, came out of their fellowship and got an amazing contract with this incredible hospital and was making really high mid 6 figures. And while he's working, of course, the mortgage crisis happens. Now, before he went to work, we had advised him, you don't need to get a big, awesome house. You don't need to buy the 2 new cars. Yes, you can afford it, but just hold back and get used to this new level of income. He'd went from making 60 to like 500 a year. And then with all of the crisis going on, they had to lower his income by like $25,000. And he calls us, my income is down like $2,000 a month. We need to cash everything out. We need to stop all these financial strategies.
Which is not that much compared to he was making 500 and he only went down by
5% pay decrease.
25,000. Yeah.
Yep. And we paused and stopped, and like, what I want you to notice is that you could be in the eye of the storm. You could be freaking out about what's happening. You could be losing your mind with all this going on, or you could be looking at the fact that everybody else is worried about losing their job and you're not. That everybody else is worried about paying their bills, and you just might have to pay attention to your budget a little bit. And had you bought a house that cost half as much and just kept your used cars for 6 more months, you would have literally felt like you were in the eye of a storm, watching like vehicles and cows just get thrown into the sky by the winds. And there you'd be sitting with no problem. And that literally the only thing that changed for him. And we know there's people who are listening now who took that approach years ago, who may have been clients of our firm for years or been on this conservative spending path for years. And this most recent pandemic kind of felt like you were standing in the eye of the storm too. Here's the problem. When times are like this, whether it's the 2009, 2010 financial crisis or the recent health crisis and the pandemic, when people have made those moves where they're relaxed and kind of in the cone of peace amidst all the chaos, they're not going to tell you. Maybe not until years later. Why? Because imagine that story of that specialty physician, if he just ran into one of his buddies, what's his buddy going to say to him? Like, oh, well, what we did to make sure that didn't happen is we didn't buy a new house or 2 new cars or take a bunch of fancy vacations as soon as we got our contract. We waited 2 years, made sure we were used to the income, made sure we had enough money saved up for that new house so we didn't have to have as much of a mortgage. As it turns out, prices dropped. Because, by the way, that home that he bought was worth about a third of what he paid at the end of 3 years. So, but you can all do this. No matter where you're at, you can reset your white coat window. Whether you're a physician, you're an entrepreneur, or an executive. Cory, as we leave them today, what are some of your top thoughts about what people could do to reset that window?
So every household has something I call the black hole, which is spending you're doing that you wouldn't notice a difference in your life, whether you were doing it or not. And I'm talking about the 3 gym memberships that the Addams household once had.
Yeah.
I always find I do this a few times a year, and I find at least $50 of subscriptions to something that I don't really need or use.
50 a month.
Yeah, 50 a month. So, take a look at and ask yourself the question, like, is this really important to me? We're not advocating a bare bones lifestyle where you're feeling like you're depriving yourself. We're just advocating spending appropriately and sometimes heavily to the areas that really make a difference in your life and to your family, and to just viciously cut away all the things that don't actually add to your life. And you all get to make that decision for yourselves. So I think those are two big ones, is taking a look at that structure in your life.
And to what Cory just said, it's so easy to forget about this, is that you can create that satisfaction by saying what you say is satisfactory in your life. And if you're not taking the time to do that right now in your life, somebody is. If you're curious who they are, just go to your YouTube channel or your YouTube browser on your phone and see what sponsors are pushing ads to you. Next time you're online reading the news, just look at all the ads. When you're watching TV and you see the commercials, or see what your friends have to say about what's making them happy. And if we haven't intentionally paused and reflect on what's really going to make me happy, what is satisfying in my life, what is sufficient, what is maybe no luxuries, but still a good life? If we're not asking that question, then we are being told. And who we're being told by is big box, financial retail, big automotive, heck, big pharma. My kids were having a great time the other day watching pharmaceutical commercials and just listening to the words of all of the ailments. It's like a 10-year-old boy's inappropriate tirade of words. He's like, ha ha, anal seepage. Like, that is the thing.
Jeez.
But there's all these really terrible things, but they mask it. with this beautiful picture and wonderful music and well-toned voice reading it all to you. See, if we're not saying what's a good life for us, then other people are telling us what's a good life for us. And what I want to encourage everybody to do is to take that power back yourself, take that power back of your cash flow, regardless of where you are right now, and just have a conversation with your spouse about what is a good life for us.
Can I give you one more quick example? So I've talked before in a podcast about a stroller. Our baby girl's 6 weeks today.
Congratulations.
And we've been on that. Thank you. On that stream of acquiring everything we need. We set out to buy as little new as possible. So anything we were going to buy, we wanted to buy used, because baby stuff just gets used for such a short amount of time and then discarded. It just didn't feel right for the environment and everything that we wanted to support. So we bought a used stroller, and it was a great stroller. It would have been $400 brand new. It had been used for a year, put in a closet for a year, and then we bought it. So it was fine. And I drove away from that parking lot transaction, not all that excited about the stroller. And I realized, oh, if I bought a new stroller and I'm really excited about it, then I probably spent way too much for this thing that's just going to get used and abused. However pretty it looks day one, that's rapidly going to fade, and the kid's going to barf on it before too long. Like, why am I spending that much money on it? Now, of course, if someone else in your family wants to get the joy of buying you $1,000 stroller, then say thank you with all the gratitude in the world. That's fine. But for the decisions that you're making for yourself, just think about it in that context. What's going to make me happy, and how long am I going to have this thing in my life?
Well, here's part of what I want to leave everybody with that you said there, Cory, that was just absolute gold. But like most of the gems that drop out of your mouth, you've got another one coming, so you just walk right past it. But this idea that if you're excited about something because you bought it new, not because you have it now and you didn't have it before, but part of the satisfaction is that it's new. My goodness, I just about dropped the F-bomb. Like, you're being lied to. That was marketed to you. Like, functionally, a brand new thing may have a little scratch or a smudge on it, or not have a scratch or a smudge. The other one does. It, in all likelihood, as long as you buy something good condition used, it's not going to be lower from a performance perspective for 99.9% of things you buy. Now, I hear some of you in the audience right now screaming, yeah, but and some super specific item that actually makes a difference. Great. Buy that single thing.
That's new. The thing you should buy new, because that makes that difference for you. Yeah.
And everything else. Just notice that when you buy it new, we have been modeled into that, taught into that, and it literally is meaningless. That is literally an emotion we have 100% as a result of the marketing that's been pushed toward us. So for all of you, we want you to be able to engage with us. We want you to review this podcast. Now, if you don't know how to review a podcast, go to our page on the iTunes store, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then you're going to see, I think it's about this show, or review the show, review that, type it in, make it as many stars as you like, or as few stars as you like, but we like the many stars. And if you would give it many, many stars, write a review, send us a screenshot to info@sfgway.com, and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, Your Business, Your Wealth, which I take little to no responsibility for anything in the book that you would find useful, productive, or true. Aesthetically pleasing. Everything that you find marginally offensive, a little bit bothersome, or enormously confronting, that's me. And with that, we hope that this
the first part was not true. The second part, I do agree with, but that's.
Listen, Cory, not everybody needs to like me. And Cory is an amazing ambassador for Sound Financial Group and overcoming who I am as a person for all of you in the audience. I want you to know I care deeply about all of you. I just show it a little like a hedgehog. Like, just I will fight my little hedgehog heart to the death, but I just look a little prickly from a distance. So with that, we hope you guys are able to take this episode, be able to do something with it in your life, open your white coat window for you. That increase in income does not need to be an increase in expenses, and could well be your path to financial freedom. And we enjoyed spending this morning with you. And as always, from all of us at Sound Financial Group, and especially from Cory Shepard, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to you being able to design